Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Insight segment. I'm Harold Fisher. Tonight, we're talking about something that can change a child's life with just one note: music. For so many young people, music is more than entertainment. It is an outlet. It can be a lifeline, a form of expression, and in many cases, a pathway to opportunity. But not all youth get exposed to the education side of music. And that's why tonight's conversation matters. We're spotlighting a nonprofit called Musicianship, an organization on a mission to make sure music truly matters. They also have a big awards event coming up next month to honor DMV artists who are making their mark in the music industry, the Wammies, 37 years now. Of course, this is a conversation about culture, creativity, creating brighter futures, and how you can be a part of it all. My guests are Eric Lilly, Executive Director and CEO of Musicianship, Vida Ali, Family Leadership Team member of Ben's Chili Bowl, and Keith Kilgo, founding member of the Blackbirds and the 2026 Hall of Fame inductee. Thank you all so much for joining this conversation. This is
Thank you.
Exciting for so many reasons. For me, I really appreciate it. I want to ask, and I'll start with you. Eric, why is music education so important, especially for young people who grow up in inner city communities?
I think it's important for a lot of reasons. I think here, particularly in the district and in other places throughout the country, music education, just like other education, is the key foundation to developing through an art or through a passion, just an overall sense of being. It also allows kids to develop, really, really kind of good skills as it relates not only playing music or playing an instrument or being a vocalist, but it helps them have grounded experience as it relates to learning things about the music industry, which may not come natural to them. Like, they learn about different other resources in the music industry, different career opportunities. So our approach to music education at the musicianship is very holistic. We not only teach the creative applications of music, we also teach production, other music industry applications, with the hope that our kids, when they graduate or when they go on to be adults, they can understand and really realize the transformational powers of music to just have, productive and often life-changing outcomes. So it's a very holistic approach. And, what we provide with our youth and our programs, it's free after-school programs. So it's free. There is no cost. There is no barrier of entry. So that's it. That's the importance of music education. And secondly, the digital landscape allows this even playing field where you can use the internet and online tools to self-learn and self-teach. And I think that's important, that our kids have an affinity and an opportunity to use tools based on one-on-one interaction with teachers and instructors, but also to use digital tools to, sharpen their own skills, which basically helps them become, more well-rounded individuals. But again, the goal is not to create the next great music star, but how do you incorporate music in your life to become productive citizens, whether you want to monetize your craft or you want to work full-time and still learn how to play on a piano and sing or play in a band. So that's what the musicianship is all about, and as it relates to kids.
What was the genesis of musicianship, Eric? Why was it formed to begin with?
It was formed in 2009 by a gentleman named Jeff Tribble, who is now the first African-American president of the Levine School of Music. But it was born out of two students who came from Howard University, one of them being Jeff Tribble and the other being Diane Granger, who was a music educator out of Howard. And they had this idea is really to even the playing field and provide youth in need throughout the district with opportunity to learn music where cost was not a barrier. So that's where the organization started in 2009 here in DC. So it was born out of that need about youth development. As the organization progressed, And in 2019, we acquired what is the Washington Youth Choir, which is a very popular youth choir that's based out of DC. We also acquired the DC Funk Parade, as well as what we now call as the Whammy Music Awards. We acquired those assets for the purpose of, now that we're doing all this youth education, where we serve a few hundred kids a year in DC public schools, we now don't have to look for a stage for them. We've acquired the stage for them to perform. So when you actually own the live performance platform, it's easy to give kids a chance to perform some of the things that they've learned over the course of being a musicianship kid. So that's one of the things that why the Whammies is so important to us. It's a platform that obviously celebrates all DMV musicians, but it's also a platform. One of the featured performers for the Whammies in any given year will be the Washington Youth Choir. So it provides a kind of built-in career development, career pathway journey that they could play live some of the things that they've learned in our classes.
Keith, first of all, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
On being a Hall of Fame inductee. And certainly your name, the Blackbirds, are iconic. And not just for those of us of a certain age, because those of us who, like myself, like my parents, excuse me, who grew up with, doing it in the park and, Rock Creek Park, soft and easy. And I could just go on and on and on. I was kind of, messing with you before we came on the air, that my favorite song from the Blackbirds, it is Soft and Easy. It's still on one of my playlists.
All right.
After all these years, because the music is immortal. But to Eric's point, before you became a Blackbird, what role did music play in your life, music education as a child?
Well, I have always been, first of all, thank you for having me.
Sure. But thank you for being here.
Thank you. But I've always been a learner of music. My dad was a jazz pianist with the JFK Quintet that used to perform at the Bohemian Caverns back in the 60s, and they recorded on Riverside Records, which ended up being run by the same people that produced and helped produce the Blackbirds later on in the years, or in Keep News. But education has always been part of my background. I studied piano with Roberta Flack when I was in middle school. I used to catch the bus from Walter Reed all the way over to Southeast Saturday mornings to figure out how this music goes and to learn all the intricacies of music in terms of reading music, in terms of composing music. And also I did an enormous amount of listening. One of the most educational experiences I had as a child is reading the back liner notes of Blue Note records. Those records explain time signature, explain what key it was in. It also gave the lifestyles of the musicians that were performing the music, who they'd grown up, and so on and so forth. You learn so many things. And those were like books. They are books, and really records are books. And so I always studied. I was in the DC Youth Symphony Orchestra from its inception, from Lynn McLean. Every Saturday morning, other than when I wasn't taking piano lessons, I was at Coolidge, playing in the orchestra. So I've always had a hunger for education, because I know that it is part of the survival piece of being a musician or being in the arts, period. And then, of course, meeting Donald Byrd. So he was like, okay, look, y'all don't know anything. Let me show you what this really looks like, okay? So he'd take us on these unauthorized field trips to wherever we would go. And we had assignments. We were in college, but, we had assignments. We had to write out, if you played drums, then you had to write out a saxophone solo. If you played saxophone, you had to write out a drum solo. So his thing was always that there's so much music to learn. And so we started learning those types of things. Along with that, I hung out with him on Tuesdays, because back in the day, Tuesdays was record day. So you'd go around to radio stations and they'd give out the records, and you'd meet all of the personalities and understand that it's more to music than just playing and singing it.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to sustain a career in this business is that you got to have both sides, and they are both full-time jobs. They're not something that you can do part-time here and part-time there. So you just have to develop the bandwidth to be able to understand what the publishing means, what the royalties mean, what records mean, and those types of things. So I've just always absorbed it. I just love it. I kind of was the one who would never say no. Unfortunately, it got me in trouble a lot of times, but it was okay. It was good trouble. With the record companies, and so I have been personally in education teaching for 37 years. And the one thing that our kids need is to see that this is not just, you can make a living. This is a career. These pathways are not just something temporary, or because you had a hit, it doesn't mean, that you're good, that you're not good. Trust and believe me, you're not.
Yeah. What have you done for me lately? What right. What is your next trick?
Yeah.
Let me ask Vita this, because
Mm-hmm.
Vita, you and I do have something in common. Neither one of us play instruments. Okay. I mean, I had a little recorder, I had a little violin, a little piano. I think the best thing I was ever able to do was to do the first movement of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata, and after that, I was done.
Mm-hmm.
But when you talk, Vita, about the investment from businesses, from community, why should companies pay attention to stuff like this?
Are you speaking in terms of Ben's Chili Bowl?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I think what we have to remember, music is such an integral part of how we wake up. A lot of times the music you play set the tone of, is it going to be a positive day? It could even be a negative day. Or it's a type of, you can reminisce. There's so many memories around songs. And with the Chili Bowl, it's equally as important as the food. Our whole mantra is great food, great music, and a fun environment, because those two elements create that environment. But we've also had the pleasure of experiencing what great artists in the music world were, because we had from the Miles Davids, the Nat King Coles, the Pearl Bailey, and all of them. Because remember, that was Black Broadway, because it was a segregated city. So you had Black Broadway. So when they couldn't perform, they couldn't eat where they performed, they would come to the Chili Bowl because it was a late night spot. So it opened naturally. So a lot of people who are opening restaurants and so forth, when they come in, they always ask us, why the jukebox, or why is the music so important? And I'm like, okay, turn that music off, and just the whole vibe changes.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how many times those lines are long, and it's a hot summer day, and the only thing that keeps everyone rocking is that song. And it's funny how it changes with the song on the radio, from even a slow song to a fast song. So I just think, for me, music personally, a song can change. It can even change what you choose to do in life. I'm from the music world, as I mentioned, and Keith, I had the pleasure of working with Bruce Lundvall at Blue Note when I was at Capitol. And he was such a love for music. When you see, and Keith, just hearing you speak, and also you, Eric, when you hear, it's so hard to put into words, because if you understand, we can't even get into the vibrations and the frequencies. Keith is probably more on that than anyone. It changes your very cell. So for me, what Eric is doing, and what Keith and Harold, what you're doing, I think it's critical for us to understand, because being part of the music industry, and Keith probably witnessed this, they wanted packages, they wanted products, they didn't care for true artistry. Not all the time, but that was the formula. And
So hold on, and I hate to interrupt you, Vita, because I've got to take a break in a little bit. But before I do, and it's because and I'll let you finish your point, but it's really important because for those who don't know about or want to attend the Whammies, I've got to let Eric, real briefly, Eric, explain to it what it is, when it is, how they can get that information out there, real quick, if you can, and then we'll come back after the break.
And the 37th annual 2026 Whammy Music Awards will be held on Saturday, March 28th at Capitol Turnaround in Southeast DC. It is a music celebration of the DMV music where we highlight over 50 award categories, lifetime achievement honorees such as the Blackbirds and Keith Kilgo, Raheem DeVant, Hitmaker of the Year, Ron Moulton, obviously legendary go-go advocate, and a number of others. You can get tickets by going to whammies.org. That's whammies.org for tickets. Tickets are on sale. They are moving fast. The evening consists of just quickly a VIP and general reception, a 2-hour award show, and a after party, all on the same at the same venue. Doors open at 5 for the reception. The showtime starts at 7 and it runs through 9. And we're looking forward. If you're a music lover and a music fan, please come on out, buy your tickets, whammies.org.
Thank you so much. We are going to come back in just a bit. The original Quiet Storm with Raheem DeVant is coming up next on WHUR-FM. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141. We'll be back in just a moment. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We continue our conversation about the Whammies in the DMV, about music education with my guest, Eric Lilly, Executive Director and CEO of Musicianship, Vida Ali, Family Leadership Team member of Ben's Chili Bowl, and Keith Kilgo, founding member of the Blackbirds and the 2026 Hall of Fame inductee. Vida, I wanted to go back to you because you have been involved in a long music career, and you've seen quite a bit. When you kind of look back over the expanse of your career and kind of look at the evolution of music, when we see artists coming up, what first comes to mind?
That's such a difficult question because I think every generation we hear the same thing. So I'm going to sound as that generation that the younger generation is looking to and go, here we go. I feel like true. And I'm going to get calls and stuff on this, but please back me up a little bit. I feel like a little bit of the essence and the true artistry is missing, and that's not a fair statement to make. But when you've worked with the Tina Turners and the Gilberto Gil or Carlinhos Brown or the Prince or the Stevie, I feel like there's so much more that goes into before it hits the stage. I feel it's a quicker process now. Maybe it's the way it's now digitized, what we can do faster. So I can only hope that the musicians of today understand the power of that stage and every word that they say, not just the thing, it's every word makes a difference in that song, on that stage. And even when you do interviews, because part of my thing was make sure, I think Keith, you said it best, make sure you're ready for all that it entails. You're ready for what it takes to make number one, like the Tuesdays. I remember the Tuesdays, but you got to make sure you're prepared for all of it. So, without knocking, because I think every generation, the music serves that generation, but without sounding, negative, I just hope they enjoyed what like when I went to a Stevie Wonder concert or an Earth, Wind & Fire concert. You left, it was a different, I don't know how to put it in words, but it was a different vibe that you left with that I hope that the ones who are going to the concerts today are feeling the same.
So to speak in your defense, Vita, and you don't need anybody to defend you. I overstand exactly what you're saying. you know, I as someone at a big age also, who of course grew up in the DMV, grew up on on not only Go-Go but the Quiet Storm, and I was, and let me just say, and I'll probably get calls about this too. I was telling a friend of mine from New York, I said DC respects rap, but we are a go-go R&B and jazz city. Okay, and I think that when we look at musicians of every stripe, Keith, I, I think we, and forgive me for giving you the back in the day,
Yeah.
but everybody was different, and I think everybody still sounds really kind of sounds the same now, even when you watch the Grammys. Am I saying too much, Keith? Am I off base?
No, I think Harold, I think you're absolutely right. I think the definition, if I don't chime in, I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's very formulaic, and it's very formulaic, right? And as much as we're in the digital world, the record labels still dictate a lot of this tone, because at the end of the day, you can either do it yourself and do your thing independently. But I think the difference is, and I think one of the things that we're all recognizing, which was different when we came up, is there's the music industry, there's the music business, and there is the business of music. And it's two totally separate things.
Absolutely.
And oftentimes when you say the music business, you think of performance and things of that sort. But part of any education process in this new age, digital age, is what does the business of music consist of? And that is also the educational component of it, which is, so you have to learn about digital distribution. You have to learn about collaborating. You have to learn what it's like to be a songwriter versus a publisher. And what does that mean from monetizing your career because you own copyrights and things of that sort. So one of the things that the digital divide has done, that those who are successful in taking advantage of all the digital deployment and all the things of today's music business or business of music, it requires you to wear multiple hats and be knowledgeable in a lot of different facets of the music business in the music industry, which has changed dramatically. And I think that the one thing that DC has going for it is it's a lot of genres. It's go-go, it's country, it's R&B, it's funk. So how do those pieces meet together and collaborate with each other from a production point of view, a distribution point of view, a marketing and promotion point of view? So those are the things that are equally important as it relates to an education, where probably back in the day, it was more separate. You had a marketing and promotions team, you had a manager, you had an accounting team, you had a business team, you had a licensing team. And at the end of the day, and I'll just close by just saying, it's today's music while it's directed somewhat by radio, the whole thing about genres is kind of going down because a lot of people have crossed over into different genres of music. So we're producing good music. It's either good music and liked by a lot, or it's bad music, and not to discount anything. But people are listening to music differently, and I think it goes across genres. So how does DC and the DC music community play their role in that? Not above and beyond go-go, or above and beyond country, funk, et cetera. And that's a question that we're all trying to figure out, as the music industry evolves here in the district, and it evolves across the country, and that from that part across the world.
Keith, I have a question for you. Sure. In reference to the Blackbirds and the early days, but I think this is also perhaps a cautionary tale for those who are listening, who are either trying to get into the music business or know some young person who is. When the Blackbirds first started taking off, and be honest with me, did you all play the music because you just wanted to do the music, or was there a point where you said we can be or want to be stars? And when you had that hit, what was that like?
Well, let me kind of run that back the other way. First of all, if we never played music to be anything but better musicians, what we did is try to learn to be what it takes. We didn't think about any hit. We didn't know what a hit was. Okay, if it hit us upside the head, we wouldn't know what it was. We had, we had no idea what a hit was. Our goal was like for even young people today, if you find an artist that you like, study that artist, figure out how they got there. It took way more than a hit record to get them there. They studied with all kinds of people. They played more than one instrument. They took voice lessons. They took dance. I mean, it was a total learning situation. So even when we had what we consider success, like Do It Fluid sold 125,000 copies in the first week, we had no idea that even happened. We're trying to figure out how we're going to get this next song on this record. That was what we were trying to do. And so I think the focus has nothing to do with stardom or wanting to be, because, again, we won awards. We never were there. We never went to the awards, and we were on the road. We were
Really?
driving the truck, going to Cleveland, and writing songs. Because we always carried, tape recorders with us. So we were singing melodies and playing horn lines and just immersed in the music. When you get immersed in the music, you really don't have time to figure out the business side, which can be a bad thing eventually. But the good part is that you become a solid musician and well-rounded, so that your versatility will get you to where you have to go. And you don't have to depend on a hit record. You don't depend on anything. It depends on your musicianship and your ability to be able to read music. I send my kids to school right now. A lot of them can't read because they want drumline. They want to, and they get down to Norfolk State, and those guys eat them alive because they can't read a note of music. They don't. Their time is not good. Their rudiments aren't good. That's what they needed to be focusing on. If you want to get what they said, how do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. And those kind of things were instilled in us as musicians. So we really didn't have time for all of that kind of stuff. We just wanted to be better and write better and sing better and do the things that we do.
Vita, he makes such an interesting point, and I was even going to bring this up because I've often wondered when watching some musicians, and particularly the young ones coming, I've always wondered, boy, she can really sing, or boy, he can just really, he can really play, but can he or she read music? And that's. And music literacy, I would imagine, is just like reading literacy.
Absolutely.
If you can't read words, and if you're a child who cannot read, then you become an adult who cannot read, and there are barriers and problems. And I would imagine even in the music industry, that can be the same thing. But Vita, from your perspective, what do you believe is the biggest obstacle for young people, not just in the DMV, but just across the country? I would imagine a lot of it has to do with school systems just not either having the money or not putting the money into music education.
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah, definitely.
I think if you don't understand the power and the importance of it, you don't understand what you're doing when you don't have it in the schools, when you don't have it in the neighborhoods, when you're closing up the small venues that, like we have the 930 Club and so forth. When it becomes $1.00 and you don't understand, it's one of the saddest things, because the Keiths understood, listening to Keith, a lot of times when I was on the road, it didn't matter to them if they were at the 930 or the Capital One Arena. They did not matter. It's the coolest thing for me. And I'm so glad I experienced the music industry when I did, because the love, and I think the ones today do, I don't want to take away from that. But when you ask, what do I think somehow the baton wasn't handed over properly. And no disrespect to you, Keith. It's not. But I don't think the baton, like every generation or everything, like when they say speak to your elders, why are the young ones making the same mistakes? We keep making the same mistakes rather than if we listen to our elders, we wouldn't have to. I feel like the baton wasn't properly. So the younger generation, and it's kind of, to me, is it a blessing or a curse? I'm not sure, but because of the technology, they think we don't need a Keith in the room. Hey, Keith, I don't need to listen to the music. I don't need to read. They don't understand what that does when you don't. You might, the output may still be a song. Now, today, I don't even need Keith. I could create my own song with technology, with a voice that no one has ever heard. So to me, when do we understand the power of music? When you watch it on stage, you can tell. I can tell, probably because I've done it, when they're doing it for the paycheck or where they don't even know if they're getting paid, and they would do the same thing. And I can only hope that the generation today and the future truly understand the price Keith paid and those who came before paid for them to have that stage, and the importance of that stage. It's not just to make money. It's a movement. Bob Marley, it's a movement. We're thinking Bob Marley is one, but we're all Bob Marleys, right? It's like, what are you doing when you hit that stage? And I just hope, they're doing the best they can to understand it's not a stage just to make it's money. It's, if you take it, know the importance of it. And I think that's where the Keiths, and the reason why, we so respect the Keiths and what they do. And unfortunately, they don't get the limelight to even spread the understanding of it. But that's where, watching this and the time that I've been to now, I would say that's the saddest thing for me to watch and experience.
Yeah. Eric, you were going to say something?
Yeah, and I think it's just very interesting because one of the things that you were talking about earlier, Harold, as well as with Vita, is kind of like with youth, there's an opportunity to learn, and there's a sweet spot with the opportunity to learn that, in this country, less people are formally read music versus in Europe, where learning music and formally learning music and reading is an obligation by the government because the government significantly funds music programs. So a lot of great musicians come out of Europe because they've been learning how to read music since they were like 7, 8 years old. So by the time they're in their teens or they're adults, they've been out reading music, for a long period of time. So I say that to say, the learning ages are grade school and elementary school, middle school and high school. And I think that's where the early development years that are key, because that way you're at least on par in equity with other students who are learning music. You can't wait till you're 19 or 20 or 17, 18. You're actually getting a late start. So to Vita's point, I think that just being able to take advantage of all the technology without the consequence of the physical collaboration, because you need both. Technology helps with the output, but where everything the learning is, it's you meet people where they are, and that's in person, that's learning from each other and collaborating, because collectively you can go build that output product through technology and other means. And I think that, that's one of the things that we try to do at the musicianship. We try to bring in all parts of the music industry. So kids are learning both sides of it. So when they do graduate or do go to college and go to a music program, they have a better sense of what the whole industry is and not just one piece.
When you, in the teaching of these young people, Eric, and here's the intangible question, when you see IT in a young person, what does it look like to you? What does it feel like to you? When do you see it, and when you see it in that moment, what do you say to that young person?
I think that's a great question. I think when we see it, I think you see it and you feel it. You see the kid that's practicing on their own. You don't have to tell them to practice. If they're sitting there, a trumpet player, they play the clarinet or flute, or even on drum lines. While there is like structure and instruction, when you're not teaching, they're learning themselves, right? they're recording themselves. So they have that drive. And one of the things that we have to understand here, particularly in places like the DMV and the communities that we serve, other things are getting the obstacles of learning music. So if you're food insecure, okay, and you come to try to learn music, you can see the kids are distracted, not because they're not interested in, because they're simply hungry. So if things are going on in the home while music is oftentimes an escape, sometimes they bring that to, and I'm sure Keith has experienced, they bring that to the place of learning music. So when we teach, sometimes you can't just get right into the music, right? You can't get right into the lesson plan. You have to get into psychologically what that youth is going through that maybe prevents them from learning as fast as maybe other kids. So it really is kind of holistic approach to it. But to your point, you can just see it. And there are so many talented kids, that are in DC that we see every day in our music class. Okay. And we see them sometimes for 2 weeks, then they disappear because they're distracted by other things happening in their environment. They're distracted by their peers and they want to hang out. But one of the things that we try to do, the discipline is we help put the discipline and the structure in and help them with the motivation. Because with the motivation, as Keith said, where you just want to sponge up everything, plus the structure, those two things work hand in hand. And that's when you really see these stars that come up. And we always try to direct kids to minimize the distractions the best we can to get them to focus. And I think also, too, as Keith would say, and just like having a great restaurant or Chili's, it's not a one-off. You got to keep at it. Learn just like all of our careers. It's an everyday thing. You can't start it and then put it down and then go pick it up again later. It's constant motion to achieve your craft. And there's great musicians, as we all know, that come out of DC. One of the challenges that we all have is how do we make DC a music city? How do we make DC like Nashville? How do we make DC like Atlanta, Memphis, New Orleans? And we can go down the list of all of these. And that's a question I pose to everybody just for thought is like, we have the same talent. We have the same, venues, we have all these things, but we're yet to really figure out how do people can monetize their craft and stay in the area where a lot of people leave to go monetize their craft. They don't stay, which makes us different than in Nashville or in Austin, Texas, or in LA or New York or Atlanta. So once we figure out that amongst the DMV music ecosystem, I see a triumphant return to music in the DMV where people are staying in the area to monetize their craft. And that way you can collaborate.
Keith, when you listen to music for your own pleasure, not to study or a lesson plan.
That's hard.
Yeah, I know, I'm sure. But when you want to sit still and listen, who do you listen to or what are you listening to?
Well, I have a pretty wide palette. I love classical music. I just turned my students on to Joseph.
Now you mentioned the students. I know you love the kids.
Did
you hear that? I said, who do you listen to?
I'm gonna bring you up to speed on that. So, no, and so Joseph Boulogne was one of the first Black classical musicians. He was a contemporary of Mozart, and where kids knew who Mozart were, they didn't know who this guy was. So I listened to classical music. I love country music. Okay. I love technical music. I love chill out music. It just depends on what mood I'm in, and versus, vacuuming the rug or walking the dog or, playing, hanging out with my grandkids. I love all kinds of music because I have this theory that a G is a G is a G. And what I mean by that, there's that one note is in every kind of music you'll ever listen to. So I love it all. I mean, I listen to music I don't understand the words to. I love Latin music. I truly love Latin music. So I have a wide palette, and I bring reference to kids because what I listen to, I make them listen to. Okay, they're like, oh, Mr. Kilgo, my God, no, not that. Yes, that. Yes, we're listening to that today. But back to Eric's point real quick is that, one of the biggest issues in the communities that I've served as an educator is our children don't have any place to practice. There's no way I can give you a trombone and say, okay, go home and play the C major scale when you can't play. You live in an apartment. You start blowing a horn in there, people start throwing things at you. And so we've not provided. That was one thing that the Youth Symphony Orchestra did, was provide a facility so these children could practice, because you cannot get this music without practicing. There's just no way. You can skip over as many of the steps as you want to, but guess what? When you get to the end of the day, you're not going to be there. So that was the, trying to get the school systems right to put the money up. In the beginning of the year, they don't put any money in the arts. They call me and say, well, we need new drums. And, anybody can donate any drums. We're not in the budget. Okay. And where the kids are going to practice these drums? Well, even if they get them. Okay.
And what instruments are they going to practice? Sometimes you're only as good as the instrument. So if you use an out-of-tune instrument because you can't afford to keep it tuned, or it's an old trumpet or something that's not tuned, sometimes you're going to only sound as good as that instrument, the output that instrument.
And then what happens when the valve sticks? Or the kid knocks the horn off the table and jams the mouthpiece, and you can't get it out to fix it. So there are things I think we can fix, as a community, to help at least provide the facility for the children to be able to practice, because practicing during school is not going to do it.
Yeah, you need more time.
You cannot sit up there and the bell ringing and something else is going on in the hallway, and there's no way for you to really focus. And so those are the things that we can really fix. Saturday school is one of them. I've always been an advocate of that, because there's no classes. We can figure out how to feed the kids. That's fine. But it gives them some one-on-one and gives them some time to sit down in a room or practice room and work on their craft.
Vita, I'm going to let you have the last word. If you had a message to the business community and the impact of music education, what would you say to them?
That's a good question. Make sure we understand it's a business, but make sure you don't lose the love and the heart of it. That's what keeps it going, whether you're playing at the 930 or the Capital One. Just don't lose the heart of it. We, the Keats and the Erics and the Heralds understand the importance of the business and all of that. But if the heart's closed, you have nothing anyway.
I think that's a great way to end this conversation. I want to thank all of you for sharing in this. And we also want to remind, our listeners, the 37th annual Whammy Music Awards, that's WAMMIE, Whammy Music Awards, will be held on Saturday, March 28th at 5 o'clock at the Capitol Turnaround in Southeast. And if you want more information, if you want tickets, I guess you need to hurry up and do that. You can find them online at wammies.org. That's WAMMIES.org. Thank you all so very, very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you, Vita. Thank you, Eric.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Vita.
That is the Daily Drum for this Thursday, February 19th. I'm Harold Fisher. Good night.